The Bible spends enormous energy attacking Canaanite religion, destroying their altars, condemning their gods, forbidding their practices. But here's what's strange. When scholars examine the earliest descriptions of Yahweh, he looks remarkably Canaanite. He rides on clouds like Baal. He leads a divine council like El. He battles sea monsters in cosmic combat. So what's going on? Why would Israel so fiercely reject a religion that looks so much like his own? And the answer reveals something surprising about how monotheism actually emerged, and it wasn't the way you might think. And now, to understand this paradox, we first need to meet the Canaanite gods. Two deities dominated the Canaanite pantheon. El was the father figure, an elderly bearded sky god who sat enthroned as head of the divine council. He represented cosmic authority and wisdom. Baal was the storm god, younger, dynamic, a warrior who rode the clouds and hurled lightning. Baal's domain was rain, fertility, and combat against chaos. These weren't minor deities. They represented the two most powerful divine archetypes in ancient Near Eastern religion, the wise patriarch and the conquering warrior. Yahweh would absorb characteristics from both. Watch how Yahweh inherits from both gods. From El, Yahweh takes the role of father figure and the divine council leader. The very name Israel contains El's name, Israel. Early texts describe Yahweh presiding over a heavenly assembly just as El did. From Baal, Yahweh absorbs the storm god imagery. Biblical poetry describes Yahweh riding on clouds, Baal's exact epithet. Yahweh appears in thunder, lightning, and earthquake. He battles sea monsters and chaos forces, mirroring Baal's combat mythology. This isn't coincidence, it's convergence. Yahweh absorbing the most powerful divine attributes from Canaanite religion. The archaeological evidence confirms this connection. Israelite worship sites, the high places mentioned throughout the Bible, match Canaanite patterns exactly. Both featured elevated shrine locations. Both used standing stones called masabos. Both included wooden poles called Asherah, possibly representing a goddess. Both built altars for sacrifice in identical styles. These weren't foreign intrusions into Israelite religion. They were standard Israelite practice for centuries. Deuteronomy later banned these sites, calling them Canaanite abominations, but the archaeology shows Israelites built and used them for generations. The practices Deuteronomy attacks as foreign were actually native Israelite traditions. So, we have a puzzle. If Yahweh shares so much with Canaanite gods, and if Israelites worshipped at Canaanite-style shrines for centuries, why does the Bible attack Canaanite religion so viciously? The similarity and the hostility seem contradictory. We need a model that explains both, the obvious connections and the fierce polemic. Scholars have proposed three different approaches. Two of them fail, one succeeds. The first model is evolutionary. Religion naturally progresses from polytheism through henotheism, worshipping one god while acknowledging others, to monotheism. This explains the similarities but fails to explain the hostility. If Israel peacefully evolved away from Canaanite religion, why the violent polemic? The second model is revolutionary, proposed by scholar Yehezkel Kaufman. Monotheism is so radically different, it couldn't have evolved. It must have appeared suddenly, a complete break from paganism. And this explains the hostility, but ignores all the similarities we just documented. The third model is Convergence-Differentiation, developed by Mark S. Smith. Israel first absorbed Canaanite elements, that's convergence. Later, Israel rejected those same roots to forge a distinct identity. That's differentiation. This model explains both the similarity and the polemic. Here's how convergence differentiation works. In the convergence phase, Yahweh, possibly originating from southern regions like Sinai or Edom, encounters Canaanite culture as Israelites settle in the land. Through cultural mixing, Yahweh absorbs characteristics of El and Baal. multiple religious streams flow together into early Yahwehs. Then comes differentiation. A Yahweh-only party emerges, reformers who insist on exclusive worship. They create polemics against the very practices their ancestors engaged in. They label these practices Canaanite to distinguish true Israelite religion from false foreign corruption. Think of sibling rivalry. Those who share the most often fight hardest to differentiate themselves. The intensity of the polemic reveals the closeness of the relationship. This model transforms how we read biblical texts. Consider Joshua 24. Joshua tells the Israelites, put away the gods your forefathers served beyond the Euphrates and in Egypt. Choose this day whom you will serve. Notice what this text admits. Israel's own ancestors worshipped other gods. This isn't describing foreign Canaanites, it's describing Israelite ancestors. Joshua demands a choice because the people he's addressing still have options. They haven't yet committed to exclusive Yahweh worship. The text reveals an internal debate, not an external conflict. Israelites are choosing between different versions of their own religious heritage. This reframes the entire biblical narrative. What looks like Israelites versus Canaanites was actually Yahweh-only Israelites versus traditional Israelites. The traditional view imagines two completely separate peoples in conflict. The revised view shows a single people with internal religious divisions. One faction, the Yahweh-only reformers, labeled their opponents' practices as Canaanite to delegitimize them. Calling something Canaanite was a rhetorical weapon, not an ethnic description. The reformers won. They wrote the biblical text. They defined what counted as true Israelite religion, and they erased the memory that their opponents were also Israelites. Right? Deuteronomy's reforms make perfect sense in this light. The book demands centralized worship at a single sanctuary and orders destruction of all local high places. It bans the Asherah poles and standing stones. It condemns practices that Israelites had performed for centuries. These weren't foreign imports being expelled. They were native traditions being suppressed. The differentiation phase required erasing the convergence phase. To create a distinct Israelite identity, the reformers had to reject their own religious past. They accomplished this by relabeling the past as Canaanite, foreign, polluting, worthy of destruction. Religious revolution disguised as ethnic cleansing. The Convergence-Differentiation model gives us new eyes for reading biblical texts. When you encounter fierce anti-Canaanite polemic, ask, what Israelite practice is being suppressed here? When you see Yahweh described with storm god imagery, recognize the Baal heritage being absorbed. When texts demand exclusive worship, hear the voice of one faction in an internal debate. Monotheism didn't arrive fully formed. It emerged through a process of absorption and rejection, convergence and differentiation. Israel took the most powerful elements of Canaanite religion, merged them into Yahweh worship, then later rejected those same roots to forge something new. The intensity of the rejection reveals the intimacy of the original connection. The Bible's war against Canaanite religion was, in many ways, a civil war, Israel struggling to define itself by rejecting its own past,